The morning sun had barely crested the rooftops of Maple Grove when the sharp clang of metal jolted me awake. It wasn't the usual hum of suburbiano lawnmower, no delivery truck, just a single, deliberate strike against something solid. I shuffled to my window, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and saw Margaret, our neighborhood's self-appointed guardian of aesthetics, standing in front of my mailbox. Her silver hair glinted as she wielded a measuring tape like a sword, her lips pursed in righteous fury. My mailbox, a sturdy black box with a simple red flag, was apparently her latest target. She was scribbling notes, snapping photos, and muttering loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear about non-compliant structures and visual blight. If this wasn't the opening act of the most absurd suburban saga I'd ever faced, I don't know what was. Maple Grove was a quiet enclave, the kind of place where disputes usually centered on whose dog barked too loud or who left their Christmas lights up past January. But Margaret was different. She wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a one-woman crusade for perfection, convinced that any deviation from her vision of order threatened the neighborhood's soul. My mailbox, installed 6 months ago with HOA approval, was now her obsession. It was half an inch too tall, she claimed, and its garish, design-standard black with no frills was dragging down property values. She'd sent me 3 letters already, each more unhinged than the last. First, it was improper dimensions. Then, it was unapproved color. By last week, she was hinting it was a magnet for suspicious activity. I'd have laughed if she hadn't started rallying the HOA board. That morning, as I sipped my coffee, I watched Margaret summon a city code inspector, a tired-looking man who clutching a clipboard like a lifeline. She pointed at my mailbox, her voice carrying across the street. "This is a clear violation of municipal standards," she declared. The inspector, clearly used to such theatrics, measured my mailbox, checked his notes, and sighed. "It's within code, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat to me before driving off. Margaret's face turned a shade of red that matched her lipstick. She stormed over, waving her notes. "This isn't over. The HOA will hear about this." I smiled, keeping my cool. "Morning, Margaret. Care for some coffee?" She ignored me, already dialing her phone, no doubt calling in reinforcements. By noon, the HOA president, Tom Reynolds, showed up, looking like he'd rather be golfing. Margaret had him on speed dial, and her latest complaint had escalated to a formal HOA violation notice, taped to my door like a scarlet letter. It cited aesthetic disruption and demanded I replace the mailbox within 48 hours or face fines. Tom, a man who wore his authority like an ill-fitting suit, tried to sound official. "We need to maintain standards, you understand." I nodded, pulling out my HOA approval letter. "Tom, you signed off on this mailbox. What's the issue?" he stammered, glancing at Margaret, who was glaring from her lawn. "It's the community's concerns," he mumbled. Margaret chimed in. "It's about respect for our values." I leaned against my porch railing. "Respect's a two-way street, Margaret. My mailbox is legal. Your car's parked too close to the stop sign, by the way." Her eyes widened, but she didn't look she knew I was right. The neighborhood buzzed. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispering about Margaret's latest war. Some backed her, loyal to her iron grip on Maple Grove's image. Others, tired of her reign, sent me texts of support. Margaret, sensing the divide, doubled down. By evening, she'd organized a community safety meeting at the clubhouse, complete with a petition to ban non-compliant mailboxes. I showed up, carrying my paperwork and a calm smile. The room was packed, the air thick with tension. Margaret took the floor, her voice sharp as she presented a slideshow off my mailbox next to approved designs, calling mine a symbol of decay. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others rolling their eyes. I stood, laid out my evidence. The city's approval, the HOA sign-off, even a photo of Margaret's car breaking code. "If we're talking standards," I said, "let's talk about consistency." The room erupted in whispers. Tom, sweating, promised a board review, but Margaret's glare could have melted steel. The next day, she escalated. A private contractor arrived, claiming he'd been hired to assess my mailbox. Margaret hovered, filming the scene, narrating about neighborhood integrity. The contractor, a gruff man named Joe, took one look at my mailbox and laughed. "Lady, this is standard issue. What's the problem? She thrust a stack of papers at him, citing obscure HOA bylaws. He shrugged and left, muttering about crazy suburbs. But Margaret wasn't done. That afternoon, a police car rolled up, lights flashing. Officer Hayes, a friend from the local precinct, stepped out, barely hiding a grin. Got a call about a hazardous structure, he said, eyeing my mailbox. I handed him the city's approval. He chuckled. This is a new one, even for Maple Grove. He warned Margaret about false reports, but she was already on her phone, calling the mayor's office. By the next morning, Margaret had gone nuclear. A city compliance officer arrived, flanked by two men in suits who introduced themselves as state auditors. Margaret, in a crisp blazer, stood triumphant, claiming my mailbox violated state regulations. The officer measured it, checked his tablet, and shook his head. All clear here. The auditors, there to investigate misuse of public resources, turned to Margaret. Ma'am, your reports have triggered multiple agency reviews. This is a serious matter. Her jaw dropped, the crowd of neighbors now filming her instead. She stammered. But he's undermining our community. The lead auditor's voice was ice. Filing false claims wastes taxpayer money. This is your final warning. The silence was deafening. Margaret's crusade had backfired, and Maple Grove saw it all. She retreated, her house dark for days. Rumors spread she was selling, unable to face her fall from grace. The HOA sent out a newsletter about fostering unity, and my mailbox stood proud. Neighbors started waving again, the tension gone. Margaret's war had exposed her desperation for control, and Maple Grove had chosen peace over her rules. As I checked my mail one evening, a neighbor kid grinned. You took down the queen. I laughed, glancing at my mailbox. It was just a box, but it had won a war. And in every suburb, there's a Margaret waiting for the next battle, blind to the storm she'll unleash.